I will give you the right soon. So we're really happy to have Zhiling Guo with us today. She's a PhD student with us from at Warwick, but obviously working in multiple sites, which she will speak about, and is working on the concept of deaf gain. So how deaf culture can be gained for theatre, and is working with how do we challenge, hearing theatre, and simple, sign translation in theatre, which is very limited. So I'm going to hand over to Zhiling and say thank you very much for sharing your really exciting research with us. And I'm going to give you back host. Make host. You are now host again.
Okay. PowerPoint. Okay. Yeah. Hello, I'm Zhiling, and I'm doing PhD at Warwick, and also I'm an actor in Signdance Collective Company. So today, I'm very happy to share my work in Signdance Collective Company with deaf and hearing artists. And before introducing the work of Signdance Collective, I would like to talk a little bit about mainstream hearing theatre and deaf theatre in the UK. So first is SLIPS. SLIPS is sign language interpreted performances. It's a hearing theater. So in many hearing theater, you can see one interpreter stand on the stage to interpret for deaf audience so they can access to hearing theater. But is that really work? Obviously no, because so first, spatially, deaf audience are not able to view both the interpreter and the performance simultaneously because you can see on the stage and the actor, they're acting in the middle of the stage, and the sign language interpreter stand in the corner of on the stage. So if I am a deaf audience, I will be like, right? So it's we call it ping pong effect for deaf audience who I expect to choose between watching the interpreter or the performance on stage. So they will miss a lot of information happen on the stage. And second, in terms of script translation, many sound-related metaphors in hearing theater are missed. So the interpreters always choose not translate the sound-related metaphors. So the deaf people will be like, what are you laughing about? So when they see the audience, they all laugh, and deaf people will be like, what? And the third one is in terms of performance. So usually we only have like one interpreter on the stage. So sign language interpreters must perform all roles on the stage. Yet they have not formal acting training. And furthermore, most sign language interpreters are used to do the style of formal conference interpretation. It's like, whereas theater translation or theater interpretation requires a more performative and embodied style. You need to act. But many interpreters can, but not do very well. So the slips actually doesn't work for deaf audience. And so now we have deaf theater, right? And most of them are bilingual theater. They use both sign language and English on the stage. For example, we have Definitely Theater Company is a deaf lead company that they use both sign language and also spoken language on stage, and they also do some Shakespeare plays at the Global Theatre in London. And also we have Grey Eye, yeah, Grey Eye, a disabled theater company. They have a deaf artistic director. So they also use disabled actor, deaf actor on the stage. Yes, politically, having deaf director and deaf actor is a step forward, and sign language is used on stage as an equally important language alongside English, rather than merely as a form of translation. However, I'm still not satisfied with this, and I began to wonder whether sign language could be used on stage in ways that go beyond simply being a language. As can be seen, on the one hand, hearing theater is revitalized by incorporating sign language element, while on the other hand, deaf theater still in the aesthetics and framework of hearing theater, present itself in a manner clearly influenced by hearing performance standards. So even though they do bilingual theater, it's like they do hearing theater. They use sign language to do hearing theater. So now let's move on to Signdance Collective. This So I will introduce this company first a little bit. So Signdance Collective established in 1987 in London and reconstituted as an international touring group in 2001. SDC, Signdance Collective Company, has played a crucial role in developing sign dance theater by fusing sign language, theater, dance, and original live music. The company has pioneered inclusive practice, fostering collaboration among deaf and disabled artists while engaging with diverse communities worldwide. By examining SDC's artistic practice and collaborative methodologies, today we're going to see how sign language operates beyond accessibility to redefine theater aesthetics and cultural significance. Okay, now I will introduce a little bit about our working method and art form. We call it sign dance. What is sign dance, and what is the difference between sign theater and sign dance theater? So I will give you an example. So on the stage, for example, we do sign language theater. Okay, we use sign, right? And because sign is too small, so we stretch it, we amplify it. For example, I will give example like sign language theater. We do bird. So we go from small to and we amplify it in bodily. This bird is very small, and we amplify it, and we amplify it. And it's also a bird. And maybe we can stretch more, like two people, one do this, the other do this. Really, also we can use our whole body to do this, whatever this. So this is sign theater, but it's not sign dance theater. What is sign dance is we not use, okay, we amplify it, but we not amplify this way. We just use the structure and quality of the sign language of this. So we use this movement, but we not do this, right? For example, the wind, we not do is sign, or we do the is sign language theater, but we just go this. We use the quality and structure of the sign language, right? So it's very abstract. And in Sign Dance Collective Company, the actor, the director, or the dramaturgist consists of deaf, disabled, non-disabled, hearing, blah, blah, blah. And we all come from different countries. We all come from Cuba, China, Greece, Slovenia, also England, Wales. And we come together. The common language we use is English and British Sign Language, and also a little bit international sign language. So in the work of Sign Dance Collective, you will see a lot of different language in the work. Also, like like Chinese, Spanish, English, BSL, CSL, ASL, ISL, blah, blah, blah. So breaking that dominance and making space for coexistence linguistically with other languages opens up the world of a play and demands that an audience listen to and recognize difference. And all the aesthetic and dramatic and choreography are based on sign language. So if the text is a landscape, this landscape needs to be created visually. And sign dance is an art form. Yeah. So this is how sign dance theater work. So sign dance bridges the phenomenological and semiotic. In that words are experienced both for performers and audiences in a unique way, even if not fully understood, particularly by non-signing audiences. It is not only language that is being stretched, but the phenomenological experience of language, which is being altered at its source. For the audience, the melody of a language, the sound of a culture, is an interesting aspect, even if they cannot translate every words. They pick up the language in a musical way and recognize the embodied meaning. And we engage fully with the text, embodying the language in a consistent choreographic and also physical way. Also, we underline the physical reality of the characters via sign dance and improvisation, contact improvisation. It immediately gives you a way into embodying the words poetically. And Pedro, who is one of our hearing dramatic, said that sign dance is to sign language, as singing is to speaking. With a text that is so full of musicality and rhythm, sign dance is the perfect tool to explore ways of embodying and staging. What amazing is how much the sign dance can adapt to different things. So sometimes it is expressed by somebody talking, somebody singing, and somebody dancing next to them. Sometimes expressed with everybody in some choreographic sign. So it is very malleable art form. And how to deal with sign language and spoken language in our work. So, for example, one person is speaking and signing what he's speaking, but other performer is not simply repeating his words or translate his words. And the audience is witnessing how they are experiencing what he's saying through their body. Thus, the translation is not just a translation, and the language choices made are often more aesthetic than linguistic. So, from a choreographic and staging point of view, if there is a particular sign that will lend itself better to a particular movement or spatial arrangement, or maybe not even the aesthetics, but it feels more truthful to a particular performer at a particular moment, that's the sign that is used, rather than there being a conscious decision that my character will always sign in a particular language. It's like we interpret all the language through our bodies, and sign language is an embodied language, so it becomes to our tour. So I can give example about my character. So we are creating a new show called Notizen, and it's about how media impact people's daily life, whatever. So my character, so in my choreography, I choose one keyword is news. So in BSL, the news is news, and international sign we use news, and in Chinese sign we use news. So which language I use? So I choose this one, Chinese sign language. It's not because I'm Chinese. It's it's because the aesthetic way is because of my character. So in the beginning, my character is a newspaper girl who is selling the newspaper, throw the newspaper to everyone, like the news, the news. So I choose this is because it means talk in Chinese sign language. Talk, talk. So people talk, 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 talk. So this is news. So I choose this to do the choreography. Yeah. So it's not because Chinese, it's because it's fit to my character, right? Yeah. And so, and for example, before and another song like I use the street, I use BSL street. Yeah, so it's mixed. So the song language mixed. And the music itself is the constituent part that has its own language that is in dialogue with the dance and the theater rather than being service to the dance and theater. The musician is not only a musician, stand on the side of the stage to play some instrument. So during the rehearsal, the musician also needs to do sign dance duet with other performers. And the other sign dance performers include deaf performers, also do musicians' work using their voice, their bodies, or the instrument. Yeah, their bodies, for example, like use this, yeah, or their voice. So deaf people can speak, so they can use their voice. They have their own feeling of music, right? So all the people will engage with the music. And next, how does Sundance Collective make dramaturgical decision in such an open, collaborative, fragment, multilingual, and multicultural process? Okay, of course, with great difficulty. We argue a lot during rehearsals. Last week I just finished like 7 days rehearsal with them, and it's very crazy. We argue a lot. So the argument are not only between deaf and hearing people, but also between different races, different cultures. So I can give you some example. So first is of course, between deaf and hearing. Like we have a hearing dramaturg, and he doesn't know any sign language, and he didn't move at all, only speak like blah, 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 blah. He never used his whole body to express, it's just blah, 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 blah. So the deaf actor could not follow, and we don't have interpreter in our rehearsal room, and deaf actor hate interpreter because so our deaf actor David, he said, if the interpreter is in our rehearsal room, it block our communication because the hearing people always look at interpreters, not look at deaf people. When interpreters is yeah, and the deaf people will feel like they're behind the interpreters. So we don't have an interpreter in our rehearsal. So I can use sign language fluently, and also Izot, our disabled leader of this company, she can also use sign language fluently. So sometimes we do some interpreters work, but David said no, please don't do that. You need to force the hearing participant, like the hearing dramaturg, to use her whole body to express. And I really remember like one moment we sit in circle, and the hearing dramaturg will give us some suggestions. So I sat beside David, our deaf actors, and I was like here. So I faced David. I want to do some interpretive work, and David said, please do not face me. You need to face our hearing drama
think Zhiling's frozen, or not sure. If we give a moment.
Have you got her phone number, Yvette?
Yep.
Are you able to?
I'll contact her. Give me a moment.
And I need to be the host, and then I can share my PowerPoint. Yeah. Yep.
And I take my picture off again to preserve bandwidth.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay, this is the argument. And however, I feel like these arguments are meaningful because many years ago I participated in a workshop for deaf and hearing people, which was a joint project between China and the UK, and we did it online because COVID. And at the end, so in China and the UK use the same script to rehearse to do a performance. So we have Chinese version and the English version. Not English, the UK version, yeah. So however, the performance present by the Chinese side, Chinese deaf people, was very poor. So after sharing the performance, the deaf audience in China, they said that it is a shit. So at that time, I was working with the company in the UK, so I wasn't very clear about what happened on the Chinese side. And few years later, I heard from the hearing artistic director in that project that she was very disappointed with this workshop, and she felt that effective communication had not been established. She eventually gave up on communication. She said, "Okay, you deaf people want to do deaf thing, want to lead the workshop, so you don't need hearing people. So okay, I will not give you any advice suggestion." However, at that time, none of the other deaf participants had professional theater training. They know nothing about theater. So they have this hearing artistic director. She was the only professional theater practitioner. And she even mentioned that she wished they could have some argument, but nothing happened. So in the end, she chose to avoid further communication. Yeah. So it's a failure, yeah, workshop. But in Signdance Collective, we do argue a lot. We use sign language, we use spoken language at the same time. We argue, we use English, Spanish, we argue a lot. And in addition to the conflicts between deaf and hearing, another conflict arises in the realm of like music. Some people want to do jazz, but our musician, I said, no, I don't want to do jazz. And these conflicts then it's become to like racial discrimination, like because jazz is from Black community and you reject our culture and blah blah blah. And also the conflicts also arise between deaf white individual and hearing brown persons. So it's very complex. And also we do have some solution. So all hearing individual, we made some rules. So all hearing individual who know sign language must use it when communicate with anyone. So for example, I'm hearing and I communicate with another hearing, I need to use sign language at the same time because deaf people can know what happened. And hearing people who do not know sign language must use body language and learn a little bit sign, and also whatever you can draw, whatever to express your opinion to ensure that deaf people can understand. And it is very important. If the hearing people only speak blah, 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 we need to stop. And we force him to use their whole body to communicate visually. And during rehearsals, so the most sentence we said is, "Don't talk, do it, show us." And there's an interesting thing that is, when I work with hearing people, we always spend many time to talk before doing something embodied. However, when I work with deaf people, we work very, very visually and bodily. And then I'm gonna use the third space, this concept, to talk about sign dance work and how sign dance work beyond the third space. So the third space, this model reconfigures deaf and hearing theater as a hybrid and dynamic space, neither wholly deaf nor hearing, but an integrated culture form, right? So the sign language is not merely a translation tool, but a fundamental component of theoretical aesthetic. This space challenged traditional sensory hierarchies, transforming sound into visual and tactile experience, expanding audience engagement beyond auditory norms. And furthermore, deaf and hearing artists collaborate to generate new creative expressions, reshaping conventional theoretical practice and accessibility frameworks. And then somehow we like to go further with Baba's optimistic interpretation of the third space. So Baba argues that in the third space, we can break with history, deconstruct power, and construct new identities, making it a place full of potential. However, some scholars have pointed out that this is too idealistic. The real third space is anxious, exhausting, and oppressive. We need to view third space realistically. Yes, it is indeed creative, consultative, and empowering, but at the same time, it also has a deep sense of deprivation, marginalization, and pain. It's not a free utopia, but a place where one must survive and create in pain. The third space present in SDC's work is not a symbolic multicultural space of freedom, but a realistic field torn apart by race, history, language, and intergenerational experiences. The Signdance Collective's work reminds us that negotiating identity is not a romantic process, but an experience of physical and emotional tearing apart. And in SDC's rehearsal process, if everyone sticks to their own culture past, the rehearsals and the work will become stuck in a stalemate of language, body, time, space, and emotion. So SDC was born on the margins of society. And the leaders, one leader is disabled and one leader is deaf. And we work in that in-between space where borders are not fixed. Deaf people are cultural and linguistic minority in their own cultures, own countries. Likewise, disabled people are also marginalized. And using sign language is a political act as well as an aesthetic choice. In that sense, multilingualism is also used to disable the text, break it, make part of it unintelligible to some audience members. It is both an inclusionary and an exclusionary tactic at the same time. We embrace that instead of trying to make it accessible and teach the audience the Spanish or sign language. No. So it is the world. The world is full of language and sounds, and we do not understand it. And that's what makes it brilliant. And in this sense, I think this is how the disability aesthetic works. It reminds us of our humanity. And Izot, a disabled leader of this company, she said, accessible doesn't mean easy or simple necessarily. So what we face is not merely issue of deaf and hearing, but also differences between nations, race, and different cultures. Identity is a permanently negotiated process that engage with multiple forms of otherness from the perspective of the other. We begin with deaf culture and sign language, yet transcend the binary opposition of spoken language and sign language, as well as the division between deaf and hearing individuals. So Baba's third space theory originally referred to an intermediary space, a marginal zone, or a platform for negotiation between two cultures, emphasizing the logic of A to the middle space and to B. However, Signdance Collective's work is not just a compromise between two culture reference points, like deaf and hearing, but involves multi-layers, like body, image, text, technology, performance, history, blah, blah, thus transcending the linear imagination of negotiation between two sides. So as this work has actually broken this binary opposition. And most discussion about deaf theater and bilingual theater still in the framework of deaf and hearing and sign language and spoken language. But I think that this dualism is no longer relevant to the current reality, especially in a context where multilingualism, multimodality, and technology assist communication, such as cochlear implant, are becoming increasingly common today. And also theater studies should shift this focus to blurred boundaries, hybrid practice, and perspectral negotiation rather than rigidly categorizing creations. It is not just a dialogue between deaf and hearing cultures, but a negotiation between multiple identities, multiple scenes, and multiple languages, creating a new hybrid aesthetic. And this fusion does not seek uniformity, but emphasize intermediate states, blur the boundary, and fluid modes of existence. And Signdance Collective's cast does not seek absolute formal equality. For example, we need like half deaf and half hearing and half sign language, half spoken language. For example, in the show we are currently creating, only one deaf actor uses sign language, and another deaf actor does not know sign language. And we have two hearing actors, me and Izat, we can use sign language fluently, and our musician can use a little bit sign language, but not very, very fluently. And we have hearing dramaturg who doesn't know any sign language. So we only have one deaf actor use sign language. However, all our creation and aesthetics are based on sign language and sign dance, developed from sign language. Therefore, it's not about who is in the room, but about the way of working. So in SDC's work, the gender, disability, the race of character are often blurred. As I mentioned earlier, so I can say I'm a newspaper girl, but also I can say I'm a newspaper boy. So it's not matter. And you can say I'm hearing and you can say I'm deaf because I also use sign language. I also use spoken language. So it's very blurred. And Signdance choice of language is, as I mentioned before, is based on theater aesthetic rather than identity of this character. However, they also preserve each artistic, personal, cultural characteristics in the performance. They adopt an ambiguous and elusive aesthetic rather than assigning the text the certainty it is typically given. So it is precisely is a complex, multi-layered, fragment, and dynamic aesthetic that makes it difficult for the audience to distinguish between deaf and hearing or Western and Eastern. So it is forced the audience to think more deeply about who or what is speaking through the body and in what language, and open up multiple interpretation of the work from their own subjective perspective. Therefore, I say that Signdance working method or the Signdance art form and our theoretical works are not a college of ethnic or disability labels, but rather through concrete bodily experience and aesthetic experiment. They present the reality of how identity in life are constantly negotiated and constantly generated. These work are not about showcasing an identity, but rather about using theater to live out the multiple multiple what's the word? Multiplicity of that identity. Yeah. I'm done. I finished. That's all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zhiling. That was very interesting. Thank you very much. So I think there's lots to talk about. I get to talk to Zhiling normally, so I'm going to invite questions or comments from those of us that are here.
Zhiling, hello. It's really beautiful to hear you speak again. So thank you so much. I was thinking as you were speaking, it's something that also troubles me and is also part of, a kind of think tank of stuff that's going on in the global south here. But I'm interested in this idea of moving beyond binaries, and I'm wondering if you've read any of Rosie Bardotti's stuff around post-human feminist identities. And I'm wondering if there's anything there that might be of interest or relevance to this extraordinary way in which you are centering other kinds of modes of communication in performance that tries to really shift any kind of notion of boundary. And I'm wondering if you've read any of Bardotti's post-human stuff.
Mm, I
Okay.
don't. Can you?
Yeah, I'll send you an email,
Yeah.
actually.
Thank
I'll
you.
send you an email. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm happy to engage with you in the same kind of way. So it's the PhD engagement side, I guess. So
Yeah.
I noticed the reference that you're giving us, and they are fascinating, but they're also quite old. And ATHA, the Association for Theatre of Higher Education, we just gave one of our big awards to a new book, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And I think it'd be really interesting for you to update, what your wider reference field is. I'm going to put this into the chat. This is a collaboration between a hearing and a deaf theater professional, and it's a wonderful book. Here it is. Andy Head and Jill Marie Bradbury. Do you know this book? It just came out last year.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
read it.
I would I would really, I would recommend that, and maybe you could supplement your opening remarks about what this looks like with this, which is a much more sophisticated and differentiated list of what these spaces can look like, including the third space.
Yeah.
And of course, the other person that I thought of in relation to what you're doing is a dear old friend of mine. I'm going to put her. I'm sure you're familiar with her work too, because it also engages some of this the intercultural dimension beyond the deaf and non-deaf work. Kanta Kocher Lindgren, do you know her work? Are you familiar with Kanta Kocher?
Oh,
Kanta,
the third
yes,
year.
yes, the third ear, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so the third ear is her first book, which is quite a little while ago, and she works out of Hong Kong often and Indian spaces. She's Indian herself. She's hard of hearing, moving into capital D deaf, and her work is so aligned with some of the things that sign dance are interested in. The kind of bringing out the complexities of that third space as an agonistic space, as a complicated space, a space of struggle that goes beyond hearing and non-hearing and into a very different realm of interculturalism, colonialism. So I think she's a very
Yeah.
exciting person. So look at her more current work. I mean, the third year is fabulous, but she also has a lot of more recent work. She's actually working right now on a book on sort of I think I can't remember what the exact delineation is, Asian or Pacific Rim. I can't remember now, but that's what her new work is about. Like there's a whole book in progress about third space, third ear practices in an Asian framework. So, and I think actually Kanta is someone you should just connect with, never mind reading her. I think Kanta would be someone to be really excited to hear from you. So reach out. She has a company that she runs out of Hong Kong. Reach out and just connect up. I think she would love to, I love the verve, the kind of energy of your presentation and your excitement about some of these moments of tension, right? The moments of all the different kinds of tensions that are going on. Kanta would, I'm sure, would love to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, I'm interested very much, Zhiling, in how you are developing almost a methodology. So obviously, Signdance have their methodology, but you're moving, between their company and your own work that you're doing in China, where people are not really conscious or engaged with this work, which is interesting. But what struck me is that notion of how you negotiate all that chaos and difference through rules. I thought that was quite an interesting, and that you, as a group, you kind of set groups, which is very much an ensemble way of working. But that it's more than just a kind of process, it's actually shifting a norm so that we work in a single language that we agree on. I mean, in South Africa, it happens all the time where people are working in multiple languages that some might know and others might not know. And so that multilingualism is a very interesting thing because, of course, there are always hierarchies of language. And we signal power through which ones we're choosing and when we're using them. It's really interesting to see that happening across different sign languages as well. And of course, there will be hierarchies there around which is being used. And I really am interested also in where music becomes a modality, a language itself. That's not just an aesthetic, but the music's also a language. But then the cultural clashes, like when you said the Brazilian and the German didn't want to work with the kind of Brazilian jazz. So these kind of cultural clashes and assumptions are really interesting when we start pushing them. But what strikes me in intercultural work is that a lot of the work is done in the rehearsal process and the negotiation process. But how do we translate that? And I think you started speaking about that with the audience, where they kind of see what you come up with at the end, but they're not part of the process. And the process is the most important work in intercultural work, we kind of have our expectations broken down or challenged, and then we have to renegotiate them. And it's really hard for an audience to understand that when we create something intercultural. So you started talking about how you attempt to get an audience to engage with that through having a kind of opaque experience for them. I want to talk a little bit more about that kind of the importance of the opaqueness of what you're doing that is not clear, and it's intentionally so.
So I feel like it's not clear. It's not very literal thing. Yeah, and we also don't have script, the written script. And but I think audience will understand through our like body, our dance, and also we have few spoken language and few sign language, and we have dramatic. I feel like so people can experience, they can feel it what we are talking about, and we also engage with puppet and a lot of the other theater element, and also I speak Chinese in this performance, and I speak English, and I use BSL, so there's a lot of elements, but they're not like puzzle to like da, but always work to just for the performance and for the aesthetic. So I think audience can understand Oh, it's very hard to explain it, but yeah.
No, I think this is a really interesting conversation because 2 weeks ago I was at the African Theatre Association and somebody was presenting a new play they're creating in England that from a very deeply Nigerian historical perspective of the 19th century, and they're being required to do a lot of cultural translation. And they're very frustrated by the level at which they're being asked to translate. And I said, when Shakespeare goes to Africa, no one's asking a director to translate for an African audience of cultural stuff from Europe. They're not saying you have to give them footnotes and, translate language. The assumption is the African can understand the play. So why can a British audience not understand the play from another culture? So I think sometimes there are these assumptions that you need to translate. And if people don't know, there is a way in. It is always a way of making understanding, even if it's not the deep understanding of the source culture. But I think this assumption that everything needs kind of clarity or translation is something that needs challenging as much as the binaries do, around what is possible. And whether an audience will go to something that they don't understand is another thing that needs to be challenged.
I feel like it depends the way you're working, because if you work in this binary, you put sign language and spoken language, you separate it, or you just put them together, you need to translate. But if you're not working this way, you don't need to translate. You don't need to translate your work, to the deaf people or to the hearing people. Yeah, and the theater we talk about is not, we don't only talk about deaf people's life. Many deaf theater, they talk deaf stories, their life, their deafhood. Yeah, but in our work, our topics like broadly, like we talk about humanity, we talk about this, like we talk about media, how media impact people's life is. Yeah, so I feel like, yeah.
It's also a bit about who owns the narrative. I mean, it's this thing of Europe asking Africans to translate their work is really about an ownership of a narrative. It's a very colonial, as you say, Yvette. It's very problematic, and the resonances within disability are huge. So it's really interesting.
So there's
To
a
me,
note
that also
from,
seems,
sorry,
yeah,
Petra?
exactly. There's a note from Jessie. I'm just highlighting that too.
Yeah, so Jess, thank you. I'm sure you can read Zhiling, but Jess is saying thank you very much. Lovely to connect. The resonances of your work were very present for me when you were presenting. It was just after I arrived on the Zoom. A neighbor started mowing and I had to beg someone to shut the kitchen window. So I have a question from both a personal and professional perspective. Have there been discussions in the collective about navigating music accessibly? For instance, the need for feeling vibrations that a performer might have, where others might have noise sensitivity.
Like the music accessibility. I feel like because the music, they also engage with our dance, and we use our body to interpret the music, through our characters, personality, and our feeling about this music. So if you can't hear it, you can see it on the stage. Yeah, it wave into our movement, wave into our narrative. So the music is not like independently showed up on the stage and to do it. So if you can't hear, and you will lose some information, no, because it is wave into it, and you can see the musician, they're also moving with their body. So for example, our musician will under the newspaper with flute, and also dance with her hand, and some sign dance. So it all mixed together. So if you can't hear the music, so it doesn't matter. Like, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Coming back to the idea of I think of performance and audience, and I was really interested about you saying that in the sign dance, that the sign language is both semiotic and phenomenological. which I think is a take on oral language as well, and all theatrical languages are semiotic and phenomenological. So I was thinking beyond the making process and the ensemble process, and coming back to the audience's experience of the performance, could you talk a bit more about how you understand their phenomenological experience or aesthetic experience of the performance itself?
So the phenomenological is about the experience. So you experience embodily the language or the narrative of the performance. So as an performer, as an actor, for example, one actor is just signing, not Signdance, is signing some narrative, and you need to do some interpreter for the audience. But we not do like some bilingual technique like shadowing interpreter or whatever. We use our whole body to experience.
Uh-oh. Gone again.
Lovely to meet you.
So, Zhiling, do you want to pick up Dave's question again?
Yes. Okay, it's between the performance and when we talk about the audience. So our performance is like not very literally like a poetry, right? So the audience also experience it like through our movement, our dance. They experience. So we're not like told like teach you like, okay, this sign is this meaning and this that, and we're not interpreted it, our work, our dance, or our uh, lyric to the audience. So audience, if they don't know sign, they just experience the sign or the dance. So I think it's kind of phenomenon.
And the kind of performance structures you use, is it narrative driven and character driven? Is it more abstract? What's the nature of the aesthetic that the ensemble works in?
Sorry, what?
Do you work on a more narrative based aesthetic, or is it more abstract?
More abstract.
Uh-huh. Because you were talking about playing character.
Yeah, yes, we have character, but it's more abstract. So the character, the gender of the character, the nation of the character, the deaf or hearing of the character is very blurred.
And is there an element of the performance that the audience can influence? Is there how I'm thinking of Fischer-Lichter's autopoietic feedback loop. Do the audience influence the performance in when it's live, or is it a fairly sealed and finished work?
What do you mean by influence?
I'm just thinking particularly that you've talked about this as theatre as opposed to film, although it's an aesthetic structure. So I'm just wondering what it gains from being theatre and whether the performers adjust to the audience response in the liveness of the event. As opposed to how strictly choreographed is the work, how open is it to responding to the audience or to feeling their kind of reaction to it and adjusting and going with some of the feedback or the experience of the audience in the live event.
You mean the audience feedback?
The way they respond to, or the atmosphere in the room, or the audience either laughter or bewilderment or enjoyment. Does that influence and change the performance?
Yeah, and because we perform on the stage and we also perform on the street, so we really like connect with the audience a lot. Yeah, we sometimes we sit with the audience and we interact with them, we play with them, and also we invite audience on the stage. So yeah, I feel like the audience they really enjoy that. But sometimes you can see the hearing audience they goes like that. It's quite challenge for them, because they're not used to see this kind of performance. They try to figure out what are you talking about, but I feel like finally most of the hearing people they can understand, but few hearing people they can't understand. So, but I don't know what the feedback of this this performance we are creating, because we only perform once, yeah, and it's just a 30 minutes, so it's still in progress. But before the result, the disabled leader told me that before some few hearing audience will feel a little bit confused about the work. Yeah.
And does that change the language in performance? Do you find yourself adjusting your use of sign language um, or dance to accommodate that, or to negotiate with an audience?
Yeah. We use like sign dance to communicate with audience a lot. We not use specific language, but also we sometimes we also use, like, I use Chinese. I just talk Chinese to the audience, even the audience can't understand, but I use my whole body to let them know what I'm talking about. I speak Chinese, yeah, or like some people speak German, Spanish, and some deaf people only use sign language, and but we use it, but also we use our whole body, so we communicate very visually and embodily. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was really lovely, Zhiling, to share your work. I'm looking forward to seeing some of this work actually as well. I think, to see it, it helps one understand as well. Unfortunately, Tapelo couldn't make today, so we don't have. Usually, we've got two people sharing. So, but thank you so much for coming and sharing your work today. And although we're a small group, it felt very generative and warm. And it's lovely to hear the work and the thinking and the explorations and the energy that, as Petra said, you've got a lot of energy for your work. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, as Petra shared on the her email, the film, her film that she's created, that is up for an award. It's been shortlisted in Durban, so we'll hear about that. But next, we're hoping to have her come and talk a little bit about that project, which is a really interesting project around how it's bringing together her disability work and her ecological work, and how she engages that through the bodies, her ecosoma that she talks about. So not dissimilar, that idea of finding ways of speaking through our bodies, what our experiences are. And the film's very moving because she literally is bringing those things together and asking people to communicate things that they can't communicate verbally. So how do we get beyond that verbal? So it's actually even beyond that to communicate experientially. So that will be another step in a similar kind of area of speaking. And we look forward to hearing, more work by many people. We don't have a planned program, so if there is anything that people want to share, please just let us know, and we're more than happy to share, or even just raise a question and have a good old debate around things. Will be very good and very interesting. Leanne, I don't know if you would like to share.
I'm just going to raise as well that part of the ADDN network has helped support, excuse me, Joseph Tebandeka, a Ugandan artist who we all know very well, has made an extraordinary film about his own life, and it's going to have it's a dance film, but it's going to have its premiere at Jomba, and it will be free. So I will, through the network, share the link for that and the dates of it. It will be on for a week, so you can catch the premiere. It's a lovely little interview with him, and then the showing of the film, which is about 25 minutes, filmed in Kampala, and really beautiful. And maybe when Petra speaks, we could invite Joseph to speak about his film as well.
That would be absolutely amazing, Jane. So thank you. That would be really interesting. Yeah, we love Joseph's work, and it'd be great to have him back. Yeah. So anything anybody else wants to share or ask? We were a little early, but I don't think that minds at this stage of the year. I think we could all do with 20 more extra minutes to have a cup of tea. So thank you so much for coming. And those of you that are going to watch this later, thank you. And we're missing you, and we're glad that you're with us anyway. So thank you, and cheers.